All right, everybody, hello. This is Ed Robinson. I'd like to welcome you to season 2 of the Deep End with Ed podcast.
The Deep End. The Deep End. With Ed Robinson. The Deep End.
During this season, we will focus on the growth of greatness, translated ordinary people who are doing some extraordinary things. And my first guest is someone who is doing some amazing things. But before I introduce you to my guest, as you always know, I like to do what is known as a Lifeguard Tower moment. Essentially, I'm asking you to do something for someone else. So here's your assignment for this week. I want you to sign up to volunteer, whether you do it physically or you may have to do it virtually because of the COVID, or make a financial donation to a nonprofit organization that are serving youth, whatever it is in your community or your sphere of influence. It might be the Boys and Girls Club. It might be a STEM program, science, technology, engineering, and math. It might even be a legal mock trial, which we'll kind of learn about some of those things today. So take the time to pour into someone else, and I guarantee you it'll come back to you. All right, so if I need a drum roll. All right, okay, ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce to you and present to others Judge Kelvin D. Filer. He is a Superior Court judge with LA County, but he is based in the great city of Compton. Happens to be a friend of mine. He's been on the bench. I believe this year is his 22nd year. Judge Filer has a fascinating story. And let me just say this before we go even further. I'm going to ask you to share this. Share this with you on your Facebook, on your Instagram, YouTube, whatever. Share it with someone because I guarantee you're going to be very inspired by the time we conclude this broadcast. So Judge Filer, thank you very much for being here today.
It's my pleasure to be here, but I must say, when you talked about the headline and the topic being dealing with greatness or touching on greatness, I was looking around saying, well, who's going to be on the show this one?
That's you, sir, you.
But I will correct one thing now, and I'm proud that I have actually been on the bench since December the 10th, 1993.
93, okay.
December 10th, 1993, I started out as a Compton Municipal Court Commissioner.
Okay.
And then I served as a commissioner for about 8.5, 9 years, and I was appointed as a Superior Court judge in 2002.
Got it.
By Governor Gray Davis.
Okay. So Judge Filer, tell us a little bit about, I mean, you are one of the few persons that I know outside of myself that love them some Compton.
Absolutely.
So what's your family life growing up in Compton?
Well, I always like to tell people, and I like to talk to students and tell them about growing up in Compton, for me, what it was like, because we always hear these negative things about Compton, whether it be gangs, crime, corruption, whatever the case may be. And I'm not saying that our city hasn't had its share of problems, because every city does. But to be very frank, when I was growing up, it was like Leave It to Beaver. I don't know if you remember that television program, but that's the way it was. I have 3 brothers and 3 sisters, mother and father. They were one of the first Black families to move into the city of Compton. Both my mother and father were very involved in the civil rights struggle. My dad was the president and one of the founding members of the Compton branch of the NAACP, as was my mother. She was the secretary and one of the founding members. But when he came from Marianna, Arkansas, and my mom came from Elkhart, and they moved out to Southern California, there was actually part of a migration of coloreds, and that's what we were called at that time, the colored people moving to Southern California, because there are a lot of job opportunities. But my dad at that time, he idolized Thurgood Marshall, who of course was the attorney who was leading the civil rights movement through the NAACP. And he was an attorney at that time. Of course, Thurgood Marshall went on to become the first African-American to sit on the US Supreme Court. But at that time, he was the legal counsel for the NAACP, and they were the leading mover, along, of course, with Martin Luther King, in the civil rights movement. And my dad idolized him. And so that's what he wanted to do. So he became involved in the civil rights movement. He came out in Southern California. My dad was kind of an imposing figure. He was 6'3". He was not afraid to speak his mind. He had certain leadership qualities that I think people liked and supported him, because he was not afraid to take on task, and and speak his mind and to fight on behalf of other individuals, which is what he wanted to do. So when he came out here, his thought was, you know, well, where can we go? What communities are good communities to raise a family? And at that time, Compton was an ideal community. Compton's nickname is the Hub City. And it's called the Hub City because it's right in the middle. It's surrounded, no other city can claim it's surrounded by as many freeways as Compton. When you talk about the 91, the 110, the 405, now the 105, the 710, the 405, all those freeways, Compton's right in the middle. So that's why it's called the Hub City. So it wasn't actually an attractive destination for young families and for particularly families of color. However, it was such an attractive place to live that the white community that was in place, they weren't as receptive to integration at that time. But my dad, of course, he was pushing this. And his thing was, well, Black people, African-Americans, coloreds, whatever you want to refer to us at that time, they have a right to live in Compton if they choose to. And he wanted to live in Compton, not only him, but him and some of the others. So at that time, the movement was, what can we do to fight these covenants, these restrictive covenants, not only in Compton, but definitely using Compton, that were keeping people of color out.
And Judge Filer, I'm aware of a restricted covenant, but just dwell on that because some people may not understand that.
What it is if people who would be selling their homes in Compton, they would put in the selling documents that they are not to be sold to people of color, whether it be Latinos, Blacks, Asians, Native Americans, that they could not be sold to them. They could only be sold to someone who was white. And it also included keeping out people of the Jewish faith. So those type of restrictive covenants were used in selling the property. And the real estate agents, they were very much aware of that. And they would also direct individuals to other areas and not Compton. And so my dad and others, and again, not just my father, but others, particularly in the legal community, ultimately they were able to have those restrictive covenants declared unconstitutional.
And Judge, what circa or what year, what era are we talking about?
We're talking about in the early 1950s. We're talking about in the mid 50s, early 1950s of Compton. At that time, and I think the case was Shelley versus Kramer, and it was led by an African-American attorney whose name escapes me at this time, but that was a decision that said those restrictive covenants are unconstitutional. So you can't have it in writing that they are restricted from selling and prohibited from selling to people of color.
Okay.
Even after, though, the restricted covenants were declared unconstitutional and found void, determined to be void, the sellers and the real estate agents would still do things that would discourage Black people from moving in Compton. They would show them homes that weren't as attractive, or show them in homes in the areas that weren't the best areas. They would again maybe jack up the price or make it difficult to get financing. So actually, what happened was there were a lot of white families and a lot of Jewish families that were buying the homes and then selling them to Blacks. And so that was the way they got around that. And little by little, people of color, and I'll speak specifically about Black people, they were able to start buying homes in Compton. And my mother and father bought a home in Compton on 135th Street first, and then they bought the home on Arbutus and Matheson, which is the house where I was raised. I was born in Compton when they lived on 135th Street. And then in 1958, 59, they moved to the street on Arbutus, and that's where we lived, and we still own that property. Now my sister lives there now. And growing up on Arbutus Street, there were some white families there first. Little by little, as Black families started to move onto the block, we had the Filers move in on that corner. We had Mr. Brown, who was right across the street. We had the Kellys moving down the street, the Simmons family, the Bowsers, the Wills, the Allens, the Jones, the Johnsons. Little by little, as you can tell by those names, those were families of color.
Okay.
And the white families, little by little, moved out as well. And then, unfortunately, as I'm sure most of you know, when the Watts riot happened, right after the Watts riot, then you did have what they referred to as white flight. And that's when the white families really started getting out of Compton because they thought Compton was next. Because the Watts riot came, it didn't actually come in Compton, but it came right up to Compton. And I remember that time because although I was just a little boy, I remember the fact that my father wasn't home. And we were all sleeping in the front room. And then my mother basically was there to make sure that we were okay. And we said, Mommy, where's Daddy? We're worried about Daddy. My father was out in Watts trying to keep things calm. And we could literally hear shooting in the background when he called to tell us that he was okay. They were in a dentist office, I think on Central and something, kind of hold up. And he was trying to tell people, look, don't go out there. In fact, there were some white pastors who were trying to bring peace to there. My father said, look, come on in here. We'll deal with this out of nothing. So he was there really trying to calm people down and calm things down. But I remember that time. And right after that, I remember I had a couple of white friends who went to school with me, and all of a sudden they were gone. Okay. And so you really had the white families moving out and the black families moving in. So that was in the mid 60s, of course, after the Watts riot.
Now, speaking of school, I want to get to your ascension to the bench. Tell me what kind of student were you at Compton High School?
I was a good student, but let me back up 1 second if I may, and I know my time is of limit, but so my father, they were involved in this, and I want to tell you how I decided to become a lawyer. So my dad was involved in the NAACP. He idolized Thurgood Marshall. And they would, at that time, the NAACP, they didn't have a headquarters because they were just starting out, of course, Compton branch. So whomever was the president, your home was the headquarters for the Compton branch of the NAACP. My mom was the secretary. So the meetings would be held in our home, right on our Builder Street.
At the Filer's headquarters. At the Filer's house, the Filer's headquarters. As a little boy, I was one of those sons who tagged around behind their dad, always walking around. And my father tells a story that I actually walked the picket line before I could walk because he was carrying me as he's walking the picket line. Okay. And my father didn't hesitate to picket any place that he thought was treating black people unfairly. He carried picket signs around literally in the trunk of his car, literally. So anyway, I'm following behind him and I'm sitting in on these meetings. Yes. And I'm hearing them talk about different strategies, like where they're going to boycott or, where they're going to go picket someplace or who they're trying to integrate or who are they supporting. And I would always hear them end the conversation by saying, well, what did the lawyers say? Or did the attorney sign off on this? Okay. Now at this meetings where my father, Douglas Dollarhide, Doris Davis, Ted Baskerville, those are some names that stick in my mind. Clarence Blair, who was the attorney. So they would always talk about, did the attorneys approve this? Did the attorney sign off on this? So as a little boy, I'm hearing this and I'm saying, who is this attorney person that everybody seems to like and respect? Okay. And so I asked my father and he says, well, Scooter, he called me Scooter. That's the only name he used. And I never heard him pronounce my first name. He said, well, Scooter, an attorney is a person who helps individuals, who represents them in court and who works in the field of the law. And he says, in fact, I want to be an attorney. And my father was actually going to law school at that time. He worked 2 or 3 jobs. He was a parking lot attendant. He was delivering milk, but he was also going to law school in the evening. So he said, I'm going to be a lawyer. So I said, Daddy, I'm going to be a lawyer also. How old were you roughly?
I was in the 3rd grade because I can remember that because I immediately started carrying a briefcase to school. And so Jane Parks is my 3rd grade teacher. And I started carrying my briefcase, telling everybody, I'm going to be a lawyer. I was going to be in the 3rd grade. And it's funny too, because I tell you a little side again. When Jane Parks ultimately retired, I was on the Compton School Board. So I gave her her retirement certificate. And she says, I remember you as a little boy because you were carrying a briefcase saying you were going to be a lawyer. And that's true.
Wow, you're talking about coaches.
At that time, I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I knew I had to be a good student. This is getting back to your original question. So my dad is telling me, you got to do well, you got to go to college, you got to go to law school. So I knew I had to do well in school. And my parents stressed to all of us, all the Filer children, we aren't hoping that you go to college, you're going to college. So that means we had to do well in school, which means we had to go to school, we had to obey our teachers, we had to do our best. That's all my father demanded, that you do your best. He wasn't asking for a certain grade level or anything along those lines, just as long as you did your best. My sister, Maxine, and my brother, Dwayne, they both, set the pattern for me and set the positive example of going into school, being active and doing your homework and doing your best. And so I was a pretty good student. But I did all the other things, like I said, when we was growing up, man. We had the Cub Scouts, the Boy Scouts. I was in the church choir. My mother and father are both involved in the PTA. I played Little League baseball, Pop Warner football, all these things of a great childhood. And we had, and that's what it was like growing up in Compton. We used to play freeze tag on our beauty street. There were about 40 of us. I kid you not, 40 children playing because our parents all knew each other. We were all, it was the village. You talk about the village raising the child. It was the village of our beauty street. We used to play freeze tag with like 40 of us. And I'm talking about 40 children who were in my age range. And we all knew each other. Our parents knew each other. They literally had permission to discipline if it was necessary. And sometimes that was probably necessary with me.
Was there a teacher at Compton that had a positive, indelible impact that you can recall on you?
There was several teachers. One of them was Richard Aller.
I remember.
He was my history teacher. He was also my basketball coach.
You remember?
And he talked to us about the importance of politics, the importance of being involved in politics. And I'll never forget that. But also Aaron Wade, who was my principal. And Aaron Wade stressed to all of us that we all have a responsibility to move forward, go to college, become something, become someone, and then reach back and help others. So those were two who I definitely will always remember and always be grateful for. That's really all my teachers, because I really felt like going to, Rosecrans Elementary School. I went to Walton Junior High School for 2 years, and I went to Davis Junior High School the first year it opened. I was in the first class that was promoted from Davis, and then going to Compton High School. And all of us wanted to go to Compton High School. And Mr. Wade was the principal, and my sister and brother were good students, so I had to make sure I was a good student. And I graduated number 13 in my class, and we had over 750 graduates. So that was a positive thing, again, stemming from the home environment that I had, how important it was that we get a good education.
Tell us, Judge Filer, what class were you in?
I was in class in 1973, and it just happens to be the greatest class in the history of Compton High School, I'm told.
Wait a minute, I'm class in 1977, and I've heard the same thing about our class, sir.
We're working on a 50-year reunion right now.
Okay, cool. Judge Filer, is it true? I heard that from your chambers, from your office, you can see the house where you grew up, or tell us about that.
I'm so blessed because as I told you, I was involved in all these things growing up. And we also were one of the first families to integrate First Methodist Church of Compton. First Methodist Church of Compton used to be right where the courthouse is, right where I'm sitting right now. That's where the church was.
Wow,
they tore the church down through eminent domain to build the new city hall, the new library, and the new courthouse in the 1970s, 1977, 78. So right where I'm sitting now is where my church used to be. Compton High School was right across the street. I can literally look out the window where it used to be. They're building a new high school right now, right across the street on Acacia. My law office used to be right across the street at 363 West Compton Boulevard. I can look out the window, the 9th floor window, and see Rosecrans Elementary School. I can look out the window and see Davis Middle School, where I went to school. And right across from Davis, our beauty street, I can see the top of the house. Remember this house on our beauty street? I can see the house and the chimney from the 9th floor of this courthouse. So I like to tell people, I haven't gone anywhere.
It's amazing. I mean, you're talking about the moniker straight out of Compton. I just had to ask you, Judge Filer, you could go anywhere. Why Compton? Why stay involved in Compton?
It was very, very important for me because I was asked to assume some church leadership and go to maybe some other courts, maybe go downtown so you can hear the so-called big cases. No, that wasn't my desire. That wasn't my goal, and that's never been and never will be. I think it's important for me to have a proximity to say I sit in the Compton courthouse. So that when I go and talk to these students, it's easy for me to go over lunchtime and let them know that, look, where you're sitting, I used to sit. And I want them to have that. If they come here as a juror, I want them to be able to know. And I tell people, when I introduce myself to jurors, I tell them who I am, Kelvin Filer, and I said, born and raised right here in Compton. And that's where this courthouse is, in beautiful, captivating Compton, California. Because I want them to see that whatever dream they have,
yes,
they can accomplish it. Because look, I told you about my dream in 3rd grade, and it came true because I was able to have my private practice right here in Compton for 11 years.
Now, Judge Filer, you graduated from Compton High School, and then you went on to become a banana slug. And the only reason I know about the banana slugs at UC Santa Cruz is one of my sisters graduated, she graduated from Compton High School in 1981. She went to UC Santa Cruz.
All right.
I've never seen a campus like that on the hill with the wooded area, the boardwalk, and so forth. So tell us about your time. And it's my understanding you have a few family connections.
I have my former wife.
Okay.
I met her at UC Santa Cruz. My daughter, Cree, my youngest daughter, she went to UC Santa Cruz. My youngest daughter is also an attorney now. So she went to UC Santa Cruz. Then she later went to law school. And I swore her in as an attorney 5 years ago.
Okay.
But I love UC Santa Cruz. And the reason that you mentioned, it's a beautiful campus. They only took down enough trees to build the buildings and the living quarters and the classrooms. So you can look outside, you want to see these huge redwoods. It sits up on a hill overlooking the Monterey Bay, and on clear days, you can see all the way across the Monterey. I used to sit outside my dorm and just write poetry and just, and it has a college cluster system where you, even though it's a large university, because it's part of the UC system, they had colleges. So you went to one of the 10 colleges. I went to Stevenson College. So you had that small atmosphere that you're learning in, yet you have all the amenities of a large university. And at that time, they didn't have grades. You didn't get a grade for your class. They gave you written evaluations that were much more thorough in terms of telling what type of student you were.
Okay.
I liked that because it reduced the competition. And at that time, it was a relatively young school, a new school. And it was after Berkeley, it was one of the most sought after schools that students would apply to get into. So I was very fortunate. And I also knew that UC Santa Cruz had a great reputation for its graduates getting admitted into law school. See, I knew that. And so I went there with the intentional thought that I was going to law school afterwards, and everything turned out perfect. I loved it. I made great friends at Santa Cruz that I'm still friends with now. I met my wife at that time, and although I'm divorced now, we had a great relationship and a great marriage, and we have two wonderful, talented children. And I'm friends with her now as well. So I have no regrets about going to UC Santa Cruz.
How about your journey to law school at UC Berkeley Boat Law School?
Now, let me tell you about that. That's kind of interesting as well, because I applied to about 8 law schools, all of them, well, 7 in California, and I applied to Harvard too, just in case, just in case. But I knew I wanted to be a lawyer in California, so I knew that I had to learn the California law in order to pass California bar exam, because that's the last thing. After graduating from law school, you have to pass an exam called the California bar exam. And I applied to several law schools. I got into UCLA, Loyola, USC. I got into UC Davis. And I went to UC Davis. And on the day I went to UC Davis's orientation, after I'd been accepted, I got a letter from UC Berkeley. And so accepting me. So when I was at Davis, I shared the letter with this brother who was already a student there who was talking to us. And he said, "What other schools you get into?" And I said, "Well, I got a letter from Berkeley this morning." He said, "What?" This brother he said, "Let me tell you something." He pulled me aside. He said, "We would love to have you at Davis." He said, "But if you got into UC Berkeley, you have to go to UC Berkeley," because Berkeley was a top 10 law school. I, for some reason, didn't realize the significance of that. But this brother, who is a dear friend of mine now, and he's a judge as well, his name is Les Brown. He told me, go to Berkeley. And so I went to Berkeley. It was the greatest thing in the world for me. Great law school. It's
amazing because you've done all of the hard work, and we still got a bunch of things to talk about. But I was looking at TV just last night, and I don't know your thoughts. This is really a sidebar, but I see these reality judge shows. And so I see Steve Harvey has a show. I'm not necessarily about Steve Harvey, but I don't know what your thoughts are about these reality judge TV shows.
They are not reality TV shows. Basically, what they are is they're basically cases where individuals have agreed to have their cases. Some of them might be real cases. And what happens is, the TV producers, they go and look at the files and see if it would be interesting or funny or something to go on TV. So they tell them, say, "Do you want to have your case arbitrated on TV?" And the parties will agree to it, because usually you get some sort of payment. And so instead of having your case heard in court, you can agree to have it decided by someone who's not a judge. And that's what they do with Steve, with all of them, Steve Harvey. Even those who have a legal background, those are cases that are basically being arbitrated. They're interesting. Some of them are realistic. And because some of those cases, when I used to sit in small claims, you do hear that stuff, and they can be funny and interesting. But just in terms of the legality of and legal force of the decisions, they're not legally binding. They are arbitrating those cases on TV.
Judge Filer, what type of cases do you oversee? And what is it a typical day like for Judge Kelvin Filer in the courtroom?
I have one of the greatest assignments in the world now because I've been in for a while. So I used to hear a long time ago, I heard traffic, I heard small claims, I had a misdemeanor calendar, I did preliminary hearings, and I had a felony calendar. After doing all that, I was asked to serve in a courtroom that's called a long cause felony courtroom. And that's where I've been for maybe the past 10 years. I love the assignment. It's a great assignment. And what it means is that I'm trying cases one at a time. Long cause cases, any cases expected to last more than 1 week or 2 weeks, they will send those type of cases to me and some of the other judges who have been here for a while. The beauty of it is you get the more interesting cases. You get the more experienced lawyers on both sides of the tables, so that's always good. And unfortunately, you get the sadder cases. Almost all my cases are murder cases. All of them involve someone who was either killed by way of a gun or a knife. Almost all of them are multiple defendant cases. Almost all of them involve gangs that were involved. And so those type of situations, those cases, of course, they can be sad because you're going to hear that somebody died. And you're going to hear that somebody was accused of committing the murder. That's the majority, the vast majority of type of cases I hear. Sometimes I get the multiple rape cases, kidnapping for purposes of rape or robbery. Again, those can be sad cases because but I love them because I'm doing my job. And I feel like I'm making sure that individuals who are charged with those offenses, they're getting a fair trial in front of me. I'm going to treat all of them fairly. I'm going to make sure that both sides have had the day in court and that the defendants in particular are getting a fair trial. That's what goes on in my courtroom. We hear these sad stories on a regular basis, but they're very interesting. And I get to see some good lawyering, again, on both sides of the table. The most difficult thing that I do as a judge is to sentence an individual, because if they're convicted, it's over. Because if you're convicted of murder and a gun was used and a gang allegation is proven, you're talking about starting out with 25 to life. And unfortunately, those are the type of cases that I hear. You know, probation is not going to be an option. It just doesn't happen. Not when you're convicted of murder and a gun was used. It's just not going to happen. And also, unfortunately, at sentencing hearings, we make sure we give an opportunity for the victim. And I say unfortunately because those can be tough to hear, because the victim will come forward and they will talk about what's happened to their life and what's happened to them as a result of their loved one being killed. And those can be very emotional and very tough to listen to, but it's important that we provide that outlet for those victims.
You know, Judge Filer, it's amazing you said that because twice on two separate occasions, I was asked to read a victim impact statement, and it was hard for me to get through it. And then when I started reading, the first one I did, the defendant who was convicted just broke down and started crying. I mean, it's just powerful. I've never witnessed anything like that. So
you're absolutely correct. I mean, I've seen, dads who were, when their daughter was a victim, was killed, and the dads get on the witness stand and they just break down. And it's tough because, I have two daughters, and I'm hearing this father talk about the fact that he's never going to walk his daughter down the aisle. He's never going to have grandchildren. And his daughter actually died in his hands, right in Carson. And it was a horrible case. And this father is just, overcome, and understandably so, overcome with grief. Those are tough situations. I've also witnessed some situations that actually were quite remarkable, where an individual who was he was a homeless individual who was well-known in Carson, and he was the victim of a drunk driver who killed him. And the case was assigned to me, he was convicted, and at the sentencing hearing, the community of Carson came and spoke because he didn't have any family members, any blood family members. And then the defendant spoke and showed tremendous remorse, and the defendant's family spoke. And towards the end, the victim's family, the community of Carson asked, could they pray with the defendant and his family? And I said, yes.
Okay.
And so I had 15 to 20 people in my well. They were praying for the defendant. This is the victim, victims' family, victims' friends in the community of Carson praying for the defendant with his family. It was very powerful. and something that, in theory, we aren't literally supposed to do, but I felt it was appropriate. I felt it was okay.
Yes.
It was very moving, very moving.
So Judge Filer, I just have to ask you this: since you do these long haul cases, how do you maintain your energy? How do you stay up during this? I mean, you got to watch everything. You're watching the attorneys, you're watching the jurors, you're watching the folks sitting out there.
Well, it's something that I think that I got from both my mother and father. In fact, my father, they always stressed to the children, just make sure you do the best you can and then learn how to let things go, because my dad had to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
And my mom, the greatest mother in the world, as far as I'm concerned, and the most beautiful person that ever walked this earth, as far as I'm concerned. She instilled in all of us to have compassion and to have love for everyone as well. And so I understand I have a job to do. I have to follow the law. I have to be fair. But I also understand that I have to learn how to focus in on the issue that's in front of me, focus in on the case in front of me. Then I have to let it go. Because you have to have balance in your life. Life is too short not to have some fun. And I love to have fun.
Okay. All right.
And so I try and keep things in balance. I love sports. I'm a huge Laker fan.
I heard.
I love going to the movie. I love to read. I love to watch TV. I love music. I'm a big Sly and the Family Stone fan.
Okay.
Those type of things help me to keep some balance, so that when I'm dealing with all of these difficult situations, difficult issues, and negative cases, there's something on the other side that kind of keeps me stable, keeps me balanced.
You had that balance. Judge, finally, I have to ask you this: have you ever had a situation, a case where you're sitting right now in your office, you just in your chambers, you just have to sit down, and it just overwhelmed you or broke you down?
I have not had a case where I have emotionally succumbed or emotionally broken down. But I've had several cases where I've read them, and I think they make sure I stay focused, because I know if I were to do that, I would lose my focus, and I don't want to do that. However, the Obie Anthony case really struck a chord with me, and it's too complicated and too long for me to go into a lot of detail. But if you Google the name Obie Anthony, it will come up right away. And this is a case where this young man was wrongfully convicted, sentenced really to the death penalty. Then when that was annulled, he was sentenced to life in prison, and he was completely innocent. Wow. Well, 16, 17 years after he's been in prison, the case comes to me, and I'm reading it, and I'm saying, what? It comes to me by way of what we call a petition for writ of habeas corpus. And again, to make a long story short, ultimately.
Was it through the Innocent Project?
Exactly. California Innocence Project. Okay. And ultimately, I held a hearing, and I reversed the conviction. And when I reversed the conviction, I'll be very frank, I remember going out, and I knew the courtroom was going to be packed, because the case was getting a little bit of publicity and getting some news. And Innocence Project, as you mentioned, they generally do a tremendous, fantastic job in representing the individuals who've already been convicted. But I remember saying to myself, because this is in 2012, and my father passed away in 2011. But I remember right before I went out, and I knew that, people really didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew what I was going to do. And I said, man, my father will be proud of me, because I'm doing the right thing, because it's the right thing to do. Because there was some pushing to say, hey, man, this guy, how can you reverse this conviction?
And he had already spent 16 years in prison?
In prison. For a murder he did not commit. Wow. So I reversed the conviction. Then the DA said they're going to think about whether they want to retry him. Now, the case is so weak. And again, it was just, he was clearly wrong. He was framed literally by a detective from the LAPD. And I released him OR on a murder case. Wow. Which I'm pretty sure you can probably get out there. But I released him, and ultimately they dismissed the case. Then I held a hearing, and I found that he was factually innocent. Okay. I found he's factually innocent, meaning he didn't have anything to do with it. Yeah. To show you how bad the case was handled, after Obie got out, he sued the city of Los Angeles, LAPD, the whole bit. Okay. They didn't even file an answer, and they settled the case for $8.4 million. What? That tells you that they knew they were wrong. And I'm so proud of Obie now, because he set up a group called Exonerated Nation, and he's relocated. He's got married. He's got a son, Ethan. Ethan is just beautiful. And he's really reaching out to help others who've been wrongfully convicted through this group called Exonerated Nation.
Wow.
So that's the one case that really kind of stays with me.
Okay.
And that, I really say, man, and it was just randomly assigned to me. And I just say, man, it just shows you how God works. Because that case could have gone to someone else. We get these cases all the time. I get these cases. I get written every single day.
Right.
But that one, for some reason, came to me, and it resonated with me that he was wrongfully convicted.
Now, Judge Filer, I want to go back to your parents. We're going to talk about Dad in a minute. Dad is a legend. I knew him personally and would come on my TV show back in the day and always walked around with in Compton.
That's right.
And everything in his briefcase. Big dude. Hey, so tell me a little bit about Mama Blondell Filer.
My mother, as I said, was the greatest mother in the world, and she was so talented. She could literally do everything. Okay. She was the secretary for the NAACP. She was involved. She's always either the secretary or the president of our PTAs. She was very active in our neighborhood. She had an important role in all of her. Now, she had 7 children, but she made sure that if we were in the Cub Scouts, she was one of the den mothers. She made sure that we went to church every single Sunday, and not only church, but Sunday school. We were in the church choir. My mother was a musician and a singer. She could play the piano and she could play the bass. In fact, my mother was an extremely accomplished bass player when she was in high school, but her dad wouldn't let her go to college. She had received all kinds of scholarship offers, but her dad didn't, because she was a female woman. No, you don't need to go to. He didn't want her to go, but she ultimately ended up going. And she was just a beautiful woman. Just always saw the good in people. And when I started my law practice in 1982, I opened up a law practice right on Compton Boulevard. And the first person I hired was my mother as my secretary. She was my legal secretary and my office manager, and she ran the office flawlessly. Wow. She had unbelievable typing skills. She knew how to handle individuals who came in. In fact, it was so funny because sometimes people would be waiting in the waiting room, and then they would come back to talk to me for a consultation, and they would say, well, the lawyer out front, Toby, talking about my mother.
I love it. The lawyer. I love it.
So my mother was a beautiful person, man. I look at her picture every single day. I don't know if you can see it on the wall. When I first come in, I look at my mother's picture and I just say, hi, mommy. And then I do my little exercise and I get going every single morning. She's the greatest person in the world. Now
let's talk about the legendary, iconic, I still call him Councilman Maxie Feiner. Tell me a little bit more about him. He has a record of 48 times at the bar in your own way. Tell us about it.
Let me tell you. Well, I told you I followed behind him when I was a little boy. He was always out walking the picket lines, always fighting for the people who needed help. But he was also, again, he stayed involved in all that. I don't know where my parents found the time. All of my little league games, Pop Warner football, my father was there. He was there watching us. But this guy was a fighter. And he was stubborn. He was extremely stubborn. And he started taking the bar exam in 1967, and he failed it. The bar exam was offered twice a year. He took it again in 1968, twice. He failed it. 1969, twice. He failed it. 1970, he failed it. Now I'm older. I know what the bar exam is because, again, I wanted to be a lawyer. And when we were young, we say, Mommy, where does Daddy keep disappearing to twice a year? He would go away for a week. And Mother said, he's going to go take the bar exam because you have to pass the bar to be a lawyer. And my father wanted to be a lawyer, but he couldn't pass the exam. When I took the exam in 1980, I took it with my father. I passed the exam. My father didn't pass. My brother Anthony took the bar exam, and he passed in 1985. My father didn't pass it. My father took the bar with him. But my father would not give up. Every year, twice a year, every time the exam came up, he was taking it. Now, he didn't just rely upon that, and he never felt sorry for himself. And he also, although he was wanted to be a lawyer, he got involved. He stayed involved in local politics. So he was the campaign manager for Douglas Dollarhide, who was the first Black mayor of a city west of the Mississippi. He was the campaign manager for Doris Davis, who was the first Black female mayor for the city of Compton. He was the campaign manager for Clarence Blair, who was the first Black city attorney. My dad was their campaign manager. Then in 1976, they told him, Maxie, it's time for you to run. And so he ran for the Compton City Council, the first district. He was elected easily because people loved my father because he had helped so many of them. Anything that needed to be done for City Compton, my father was there. Compton, my father was there. In fact, his nickname was Mr. Compton. That was his nickname because everybody knew that if something, he always focused on the positive. And that's what I try to do as well. He didn't want to ignore the negative, but he focused on the positive because the press surrounding the city of Compton, LA, and Long Beach, it would always focus on the negative things. My father said, you need to focus on the positive. So I followed after my father, and after I opened up my private practice, I was elected and served on the Compton School Board, and I served there for 12 years. And I hired my father. My mother was my secretary. I hired my father as my law clerk. Let me tell you, in 1991, I'm sitting in an executive session with at the Compton Unified School District Board of Trustees meeting. We're sitting in the executive session, and that's where we're discussing things in private and personnel matters and so forth. And then the secretary, the superintendent secretary, comes to the door and she says, Attorney Filer, because I was an attorney at that time, this is 1991. She said, Attorney Filer, your brother is here to see you. Now, they normally don't interrupt us unless it's an emergency. So now I'm saying, oh man, I hope everything's okay.
Right.
So when I go to the door, my brother Anthony, now Anthony is a lawyer. I told you, he's my younger brother. He is a lawyer. He is holding his son, Tony, who's a little baby. Now, ironically enough, Tony, I just swore him in. He's also a lawyer now. I swore him in 6 months ago. But at that time, he's holding Tony and he says, Daddy passed the bar.
Wow.
So I do like this. I say, what? I think I literally went into shock. I walk back into the school board meeting and I tell my colleagues, my father passed. I'm so happy. And they looked at me like this. Why are you happy if your father passed away? I said, no. Now they knew of his journey.
Right.
I said, no. He passed the bar. They said, what? They did the same thing. So we literally went out, we finished up our school business and announced it, and the audience erupted in applause. Because like I said, everybody knew about my father. They loved him, they adored him, and they knew that he was trying to become a lawyer. So in 1991, 24 years, on his 48th attempt, he passed the California bar exam.
Wow. Now, did Dad open the envelope himself?
No.
What?
No. He was sitting at home watching. He was watching a show called Matlock that's about a lawyer. Anthony comes over to visit and he says to Daddy, he says, Daddy, your results up there on the mantle that we used to call the mantle of the black thing. He said, your results on the black thing. And Daddy says, go ahead and open it up. And he says, tell your mommy to send in the application. Because my mother, literally by this time, it was such a routine. Right. We always felt that everybody knew about my father's journey. We said, if Daddy ever passes the bar, somebody from the state bar is going to call us and say, make sure you check your mail or watch it. We just knew that because everybody knew of his journey.
Yeah.
And it happened. Anthony says he gets the envelope and he holds it up to the light.
Yeah.
And can see successful applicant. And he says his hands just start shaking as he opened it up and said, congratulations, you were successful. And he just goes, Daddy passed the bar. And my father saying, what? And the whole house is going crazy. And I kid you not, this is before the internet. This is before the internet. Okay. But after that evening, every television station in Southern California, channels 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, every single one of them did a feature story on my father. Every single one of them came out and interviewed him. And every time they did, I was standing right next to him because, see, this is great publicity for my law firm.
Wow.
Oh, that was a great time.
48 times over 24 years.
Easily the record. Nobody else has even come close. And you can understand it. Anybody who's taken the exam, you know how draining. After I took it the first time, I was literally sick because it was 3 days long and it's draining. It's emotionally draining. It's physically taxing. And it's intellectually taxing to the point where, if you didn't pass, it can be discouraging. And you say, what does it take? And my father, he took it 48 times. There was several times he came within 1 point or 1.5 points of passing.
What's the
70%? 70% is, and he got 69.5. He got 69. Can you imagine?
Wow. Is that right?
But he did not give up. He did not give up. And his thing was, And he said he was never, ever going to give up. And he was quoting Winston Churchill, which is the phrase that Churchill used in World War II. And that's what's on his tombstone. Never, ever give up. And that's what I try and tell people. Whatever your dream is, never, ever give up. Because he wanted to be a lawyer, and man, it's just so validating.
Yes, yeah.
You know, when he passed the exam. And to this day, I still get letters from people, emails from people who say they were inspired by my father's story. And they even made a television show called Sparks that was based upon my law practice, because the producer heard about my father's story. So there's a television show called Sparks. It was about an attorney in Compton, which is our family. And it's clearly based upon my law practice. And it ran for 2 seasons. And Miguel Nunez and Terrence Howard and Robin Givens and the actor who played the father on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, they were all on the show. We met all of them. And it was just, again, a wonderful tribute to my dad, not necessarily to me, but it was a wonderful tribute to him. It's a great show.
Judge Filer, what did you learn from Dad's perseverance 48 times, over 24 years? What was the key takeaway for you?
What I learned is that whatever your dream is, always pursue it. And don't get discouraged by the fact that somebody else said, well, maybe not now, or somebody else said you didn't, quote unquote, pass the test. Don't get down about that. Just make sure you do your best, though. That's all, because that's really all you can do. And to have that faith, and particularly my mother instilled in us to always have that spiritual basis and that spiritual faith, that whatever's going to happen, it happens for a reason. And, 48 times for my father, yes, that was tough. But ultimately, he was able to practice law. And again, unfortunately, he was towards, the latter part. He was 61 years old when he finally passed the bar. And that's a time when most people were looking to retire. But he had his dream to be able to walk to the courthouse from the Compton courthouse to walk back over to the office, which again was right on Compton Boulevard. And I use that story again as an example to others, because maybe it can inspire them to pursue their dreams. How
did you guys celebrate that monumental passing of the bar?
Well, first off, the city of Compton, the entire city was celebrating. I'm telling you, we partied for like 3 months. And so people had, I remember there was a Scissors right across the street. We had a great event there. Okay. And, Daddy was just featured on all these different shows. We went on the Montel Williams show. They made this television show called Sparks. He was on, at that time, was the Bill Cosby show. Okay. And it was good because it told a positive thing that was coming out of Compton. So that was the thing that we like to focus on, the fact that it came out of Compton. See, my father, even despite that, like I said, he was well known for his political activism and for his involvement. I mean, my dad, when the Martin Luther King Hospital, one of the reasons they selected the hospital to put it where it was, my father spoke before the commission, and he gave this story about how my brother Dennis had suffered a horrible accident where he bit down on an electrical cord, and my mother and them took them to a couple of local hospitals, and they refused to even see him because he was Black. And then they had to drive way out to Big Harbor General Hospital in San Pedro before they could get into a hospital. And my father told that story, and in support of why we needed a hospital in what they call Watts, but it was South Central LA, why in that area, in the Compton area, why we needed a hospital. Right. He carried the flag, the California, at the March on Washington. When you see the California flag, my father's carrying that flag. Okay. And that was back in 1963 when Martin Luther King gave his famous, I Have a Dream speech. My dad is carrying that flag. And anytime they show these documentaries, and they're going to see a lot of them this weekend because it's Martin Luther King weekend, when you see the documentaries, they always, at some point, they talk about the fact that people came from all over the country, and then they'll say, even California, and boom, you'll see my father. They show the California delegation, and my father is carrying that flag. Like I said, his involvement with the NAACP, he was always there. He was all part of it. He was very involved with the local political activity in terms of helping to elect people, particularly people of color. So he made his mark, and I'm proud to say he made his mark. And so I try and live up to that, just by making sure that I do the right thing. That's Absolutely. It. That's all we can do. Be fair, do the right thing, but also try and have some fun. Yeah. Well, Mom and Dad laid a great foundation for you and your siblings. It's my understanding that at the young age of 26 that you actually argued a case and won at the California Supreme Court. Tell us about that. that is so ironic as well, because I was actually working with the state public defender's office for 2 years. I knew I wanted to have my practice in Compton, but for 2 years I had to get ready, save money, and learn about the law and stuff. So I worked with the state PD's office, and they handle only criminal appeals. This case was randomly assigned to me, case of People versus Alonzo Taylor. Ironically enough, guess where he's from?
Where?
Compton. He's convicted of murder and actually sentenced to death. And but during the course of his trial, he wanted to wear civilian clothes, and the judge at that time, who was actually a friend of my father's, wouldn't let him wear civilian clothes. So on the appeal, it was assigned to me, and I argued that he was denied due process of law and denied equal protection of law, because if somebody who could bail out or who had money, they would be in a situation where they're wearing civilian clothes in front of the jury. And he was forced to wear jail guard.
Okay.
He was wearing blue LA County jail suit that said LA County jail on the back. So he was denied the presumption of innocence. He was denied the appearance of innocence. And I argued the case to the California Court of Appeal first, and then to the California Supreme Court. I was only, like you said, 26 years old. And when I argued the case, Alan Broussard was one of the justices. He was only Black on the California Supreme Court at the time. So it was clear to me that he was going to be the one who's going to write the opinion, because he was asking the most questions. And so when the decision came down, it was unanimous. They reversed his conviction. You know, that's a case that is relied upon by every single judge and every single defense attorney in the state of California. When they say my client wants to wear civilian clothes, they're relying on People versus Taylor. The citation for that case is 31 Cal 3rd 488. That's my case, People versus Alonzo Taylor. And I am proud of that, because not too many people get the chance to even argue a case, let alone win a case. And I was, like I said, I was 25, 26 years old.
Wow, powerful. Thank you for sharing that. So let me ask you a couple other things. So I know that you are a diehard Laker fan, because when we were trying to set up this interview, you told me summarily that, Ed, we can do it at any time. Just don't do it. Don't contact me during the Laker game or whatever. Do the folks that occupy your courtroom and your sphere of influence, folks know that you a diehard Laker fan?
Let me tell you, not only do they know, I make it clear they know. And when you see my courtroom, you see all the Laker stuff. Now I make sure that I'm not doing anything that demeans the appearance of the courtroom.
Okay.
So, but I do have Laker floor mats. I have Laker-ish things on my bench. You can clearly see that I'm a big fan of the Lakers. When you go into my jury room, you're going to see Laker stuff. I have Laker pencils and pens for my jurors. I have the colors of my notebooks are purple and gold. It's clear. And in fact, I really use that as a means of helping the jurors to become comfortable and to calm down. Because the type of cases I hear, I told you, I hear the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
One of the things I do is we have these conversations about the Lakers. The case I'm trying right now, I've been in trial for a month and a half. And me and the jurors, we talk every single day. We just talk not about the case, but we just joke. They tease me because they say when the Lakers lose a game, they come in kind of smiling and laughing and stuff. They say, "How you doing, Judge? How the Lakers doing?" I said, "Lakers doing okay." So yeah, I make it a point. I'm unabashedly a big Laker fan. I actually was selected as the world's greatest Laker fan in 2007, and that was a wonderful, wonderful honor. You know, I met all the Lakers. My favorite Lakers, Magic Johnson. I've interviewed Kobe Bryant before he passed away, obviously.
So how does that happen?
I submitted, they were having this contest on Channel 9, who's the world's greatest Laker fan? Tell us in 50 words or less. And that's what I did. I told them about how I was a Laker fan going back to 1967, how, you know, Magic Johnson, how would I wear Laker ties. I write with Laker pens. My dog's name is Kobe. You know, I went on and on and on. Next thing I know, they announced, they said, "Hey, you were one of the finalists." So then I had to go in and talk with James Worthy and some others, and then I won. And so I got to go to the media day for the next year, and that's when I interviewed Kobe Bryant. And on Channel 9. And of course, I have all that on videotape and stuff.
And it's my understanding that you sang the national anthem at a Lakers game?
I'm working, I sang national anthem. This is on my bucket list. This is one of the few things that remains on my bucket list. I want to sing the national anthem at a Laker game. I have sung it already at the Lakers minor league club game. They gave me a tryout. And everybody there says I did a good job. So all I'm waiting for is I'm waiting on Lisa Fernandez, if you're listening. I'm waiting on Keisha Nix. Keisha Nix is now the.
Okay.
Give me that call. Oh yeah, I'm ready to go. And all they have to do is call me. I don't need any rehearsal or anything. I'm ready to go.
All right. Now you heard it here. He didn't ask to do this, but if any of you can push some information to the ladies at the Lakers organization that he alluded to, tell them, hey, put Judge Filer on, give him an opportunity. So thank you, Judge. Go ahead.
Keisha Nix knows because I have Lakers season tickets, so I go to the game where I see her walk by every time. So I'm waiting. I said, if they don't show up, Keisha, all you do is call me. I don't need a rehearsal.
Okay, cool. And so as we get ready to wind down, Judge Filer, I just want to thank you very much for your time. And I just want to do just a real quick lightning round, so to speak, this or that, so to speak. So 2 choices, you just pick one. Michael Jordan, Chicago Bulls, or the Lakers?
Lakers.
Beverly Hills or Compton?
Compton.
The Isley Brothers or Sly and the Family Stone?
Sly and the Family Stone. I love the Isley Brothers, but Sly and the Family Stone, my all-time favorite group. The guy was ahead of his time. He's a genius. And I have some stories I can tell about Sly as well. Larry Graham, I've sung with Larry Graham. He was the bassist of Sly and the Family Stone. Oh yeah, I've been on stage with Sly. In fact, unfortunately, when I went on stage, he left.
Oh, okay. And then what about if you combine the 2 schools, Centennial and Dominguez versus Compton High?
Compton High School all the way. All the way.
It's ironic, Judge Filer. I was looking the other day at our Alumni Association, Compton High School, and I saw you on with your blue jacket on and, the insignia and whatever. And I said, man, this guy, I never met someone, very few people like you that really, really loves our beloved city of Compton. I'm very proud of it. In my 33 years at Southern California Edison, I always let folks know that at the church, people know wherever I go, I wear this thing. I don't know if you can see it, but it's
I have one of those. I've got my Compton band.
Compton bracelet. So everywhere I go, people would ask me, they thought I was trying to be in vogue. I said, no, I'm from Compton and I'm proud to say this. So I just want to thank you for being a bright light in our city and letting individuals know that the growth of greatness is here. You told a very powerful story about you, Dad, Mom, your siblings, and so forth. I'm very appreciative. So I would just want to say, is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
The only thing I can say is that during these are tough times, but don't give up. Don't give up hope. Keep moving forward. And just as the tombstone for my dad, right over, of course, at Abby's mortuary, he insisted on being buried in the city of Compton. Says never ever give up. Yeah. Don't give up. Whatever your dream is, whatever you are pursuing, whatever you think you want to do, and hopefully you're doing something that helps others, either by way of example or actually reaching back to help them. Don't give up. That's the easiest thing to do.
Right. I didn't know that Dad was buried at Angeles Abbey. My dad is buried there also.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Dad and Mom.
So again, Judge, I thank you very much. And I mean, just wish you the best in all your endeavors. And I know, so are you guys back in session or what are you guys?
We are in session, but we're doing it in a contracted way, meaning that it's limited. My trial has been going on for like a month and a half, so we didn't want to stop it. But what I did do is I spread everybody out. We make sure that that everything's clean. We make sure that the air filtration is there. We provide masks for everyone. We've been real careful to make sure that we're abiding by all the requirements and policies of science, and to make sure that the health and welfare of the litigants and our jurors is being maintained. And so I'm so proud of these jurors, so proud of them. So when all of you get your jury summons, make sure you respond to it. And Ed, I want to thank you, because actually what you are doing is you are a messenger. Mm-hmm. And it's always important that we have messengers who are spreading the truth. So I want to thank you for staying in that mode and staying in that state and keeping the truth out there, because it's very, very important.
You're welcome, Judge Filer. Thank you for being one of those truth speakers. And so again, as we sign off, we always like to have what is known as a coachable moment. Coachable moment is something that you do for yourself. And essentially what I want you to do is I want you to take one point or one learning from Judge Filer's story. He told us some positive things that are happening, practical things to help you to persevere. I want you to take one of those things and I want you to apply it to your life. That's what I want you to do for this week. And just keep in mind, again, you can share this information on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, at Deep End with Ed. And just keep in mind that also that the Deep End podcast, Deep End with Ed podcast, is a Beyond the Mask conversation production. And I'm very grateful for Nicole Robinson, who's been serving as my production assistant, director, and so forth. And so let's look forward to another episode of the Deep End with Ed.